Alright everyone, this is going to be the next video in the, well, of course, endless series. In this video I'm going to be kind of deviating from my normal path of showing you techniques and tools and tips and tricks, to showing you how to render a model. Now, this is going to be a kind of free-form kind of, well, here's what goes into it, because I'm still in the process of learning to play with these models, so I'm still kind of learning by doing. So I can show you the general workflow for rendering, but some of the finer nuance I may have to shoot videos later to accurately show you. So let's go ahead and open up the rocket nozzle that we created in the equation-driven curves video. And once again, we'll just kind of rotate it around. Now with rendering is the process of taking this 3D contour file, okay, the solid part, however the CAD program wants to see the model, but actually taking the shape, the surfaces, and rendering it with things like appearances, textures, scenes in the background, such that you can export the image. Now, we all know what this looks like. Every time you see a picture of a 3D model online, it doesn't tend to look like this, with just abstract gray shapes and you know, this off gray color palette. So let's go ahead and get into rendering. Click over here on SolidWorks add-ins and add the Photo View 360 add-in, and then you'll see that you get the render tools option. Now, the first thing I always like to do when rendering a model is start to go through the appearances, essentially the 2D textures that I can map onto the surface of this, because that's really how you get to see how the material will interact with the shape. So go ahead and click Edit Appearance, and you'll see this Appearance Scenes and Decals tab appear. We'll click down. As you can see, you can kind of go through and you just have general categories for stuff. You have your glass, your metal and plastic and whatnot. Then you have this organic tab. So if we wanted to render the rocket nozzle in oak, we could. We're not going to, because what use would that be? So we'll go over to composite. Well, actually, let me go this way first. I mean, as you can see under metal, you have pretty much standard metal options. Your aluminum, then you have polished aluminum versus brushed aluminum versus sandblasted and whatnot. You'll notice that some of the textures are not readily apparent. That is, some of the finer texture does not appear instantaneously, such as the brushed aluminum versus the polished aluminum. You'll notice that the shininess really doesn't appear yet. That's because it tends to only come out during the process of rendering to save your GPU. So right now what we'll do is we'll go a composite texture, namely the carbon fiber epoxy. And you'll see this thing pop up where it asks you, is everything okay? You can select the geometry and whatnot. If you don't want to select an entire part, you can select simple faces and go through it in a face-by-face manner. But we'll just blanket the whole thing and just go okay. Now, typically, the thing that I like to do next is add cameras. And I do that before editing the scene. Here's why. It's only once you have the camera in place that you're going to actually start to see how the backdrop, how the scene interacts with the actual model. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to View, Lights and Cameras. Then we're going to go Add Camera. And you'll see this kind of screen appear. Now, essentially, this is what the camera sees over here. whereas this is the camera's orientation. And you can see that by clicking around, it's kind of moving around. I practiced this real fast right before I felt I had it down, but apparently SolidWorks likes to always throw curveballs at me, So as you can see pretty clearly, sometimes the views do require a little bit of altering to get to come out right. And of course, again, the key to kind of mastering this is just sit down and play with it. I mean, there's really not much else to say. So once you have it looking, acceptable or however you want it to look, then click OK, and that sets the camera into position. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go up here in View, and you'll see this extra option that just appeared that allows you to select the camera's perspective as your actual viewport option. Now here's why we set up a camera. We could ideally just render it off the isometric view, but the isometric view is not proportionally accurate. Now you probably noticed a little bit of that in the earlier video that I did where I did linear patterns, how I created that square and punched all the holes through it. You'll notice that as I was rotating around with it, at the end of the video I was just kind of describing things and blabbing my head off. You'll notice that under certain rotations it didn't appear to be square. And that's an important thing to know about isometric, is it isn't perspective. It isn't proportionally accurate. So things will be stretched, things won't come out looking the way they actually do in real life. And that's why you use the cameras rather than just the default stock viewports. Now anyway, let's go up here to edit scene. And as you can see, you have all the scenes. You have studio scenes where it actually mimics a studio. You have this odd traffic lights one. We'll go reflective floor black. And the final thing we're going to do before we actually render it is we're going to go up here to View. We're going to go Lights and Cameras. We're going to add a spotlight. We're going to probably try and put it like right about there. Now what you should do is you should go over here and click on Photo View 360. You'll notice that by default lights are typically off, so you have to turn it on. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to step brightness up to about 0.5. Just so that we get some good punch off the light. And again, all these things are kind of, there's no textbook to these kind of options. You just kind of have to experiment with them. Now what we'll do is we'll click Preview Window just to check and make sure everything comes out well. And once you see that it starts to look reasonable, that's when you can go over here, Render Options, pick an aspect ratio, click OK, then go Final Render. And if you're actually sitting next to your computer, or if you're using a laptop, you'll notice that right now is when it starts to get really hot, because this is GPU intensive stuff. This is creating a lot of shapes, a lot of polygons, and especially in the case of stuff like carbon fiber materials in SolidWorks, essentially textures that have a lot of subshapes. This is especially true. So you can kind of get away with rendering polished aluminum, for example, because the shapes have a lot more correlation between each other, whereas carbon fiber is obviously woven. So the texture is woven. So once this whole process completes, we can basically go down here, click Save Image, and go from there. And I would kind of go to that part, but that's just going to bore you. So that being said, that's rendering in a nutshell. Obviously, the key to success with rendering is, believe it or not, just playing with it. In the next set of videos, I'm going to go back to actually techniques. So stay posted for those guys. Alright.